Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time. My name is Heather. This is my little corner of BookTube, and this is a video about the Gormenghast trilogy. If you've been following my channel, it's been a long-awaited video. I don't know why I kept putting it off. It's just, I guess I'm kind of scared to really dive into this without giving spoilers. Just to give you a little bit of a background, this is a trilogy of obviously 3 books. Uh, Titus Grown, Gormenghast, and Titus Alone. It follows the main character of Titus Grown, that is his name. Um, it is written by Mervyn Peake, who studied first to be an artist. And this is an illustrated copy. All 3 books are in this book here. And this is an illustrated edition, but the illustrations, they were done by Mervyn Peake, but they were not meant to be part of the book or the books. They were just sketches he was doing just to give himself ideas of what the characters look like and stuff. But I'll kind of be flipping through while I'm talking, give you something visual to look at, and show you some of the illustrations as we go along. So basically, it is the main character is Titus Grown, and in the first book, he actually isn't really much of a character at all. He's a baby, and so he's more kind of, I don't know, plot device. Kind of moves the story along. And then in the second book, Gormenghast, he is at the beginning he's 7 years old, and then it ends when he's a young man, probably about 18 or so. And then Titus Alone is when he's older, and still a young man, but he is a little bit older, and he is out in the world. He leaves his world of Gormenghast. Gormenghast is the name of a castle. Usually when people ask me what this trilogy is about, I just say, well, it's this huge castle, big, almost city-state of a castle where a lot of people live, and they have all these rituals that they do, although they don't know why they do them, but they have to do the rituals. And basically, the villain of the piece, he uses those rituals to kind of manipulate the people in the castle. So, so I'm going to go through the books one by one. Then I'm going to, my plan for the video is to go through the books one by one. Not exactly give spoilers, but just kind of give you an idea of what it's like. After that, I will let you know what it was like, because I used ChatGPT AI as a reading buddy. I would often converse and discuss the book with ChatGPT, and that was an interesting experience. So I'll kind of let you, without spoilers, kind of let you know what that was like to use ChatGPT. And then after that, when I first introduced the idea that I might do a video about this, I did say that it was a life-changing experience, and somebody commented saying, well, what's so life-changing about it? Well, so at the end of the video, I'll kind of let you know why I call this a life-changing experience. So, first of all, Titus Grown, the first novel, takes place in Gormenghast, the big old castle. And some of the characters you'll see, the Earl, his name's Sepulchre Grown. That is Titus's father, Sepulchre, like Sepulchre, whatever, Sepulchre, whatever. Sepulchre Grown is the Earl, and he has his wife, the Duchess Gertrude Grown. They have a daughter named Fuchsia, and of course they have Titus. Then there's Nanny Slag, who is Fuchsia and Titus's nanny. And there's Mr. Flay. He's kind of like a personal assistant to the Earl. And there's Swelter, who is the big cook. He's a big old chef. And I'll show you pictures when I'm flipping through here. He's the big old chef of the castle, and he's kind of a disgusting person. Not because he's big, but, because he's just disgusting. And there's the Dr. Alfred Prunesqualler, and his sister Irma, who lives in the castle. I'm so sorry if you hear sirens right now. Go down our street. That's Gertrude. That's Titus's mother. But so we have Alfred and Irma. We have the twins. Those are the Earls, Sepulchre's sisters, who are identical twins. Their name is Cora. The names are Cora and Clarice. And then a very main character, the villain himself, is Steerpike, who is at the beginning of the novel a young man. Of course, yeah, this is Swelter the cook. Yeah, but anyway, Steerpike is a young man at the beginning of the novel, and as I said, he realizes how important these rituals are to the castle, and so he realizes that he could just kind of get into people's heads a little bit and kind of earn power himself. Also, there's kind of a minor character. She comes from the village. She has her own little storyline, basically. She comes from the village that is outside the castle. Her name is Kita, and she is brought in to be a nursemaid for, or a wet nurse, if you will, for Titus. This is Steerpike right here. Not exactly a handsome young man, but a young man. So basically, Titus Groan, the first book, goes through the first year of Titus Groan's life. And it kind of sets up Steerpike's plan. I have a cat who's looking at the microphone. He kind of sets up Steerpike's plan to manipulate and kind of starts his little journey into trying to gain the power for himself. And then Gormenghast, the second book, of course, oh, by the way, in the first book, Titus, just a baby himself, not, as I said, he wasn't really a character. This is Fuchsia, right here. Not really a character, but a plot device. But the funny thing is like, even though Steerpike is using the rituals to manipulate, Titus ends up kind of ruining the rituals just by being a baby and doing things that babies do, like cry and stuff like that, and throw things and stuff. So he unwittingly ruins the rituals. So in the second book, we get more and more of how of Steerpike's rise to power. And as Titus grows up, we learn that he really doesn't like the rituals either. But instead of using them to manipulate like Steerpike does, what Titus tries to do is escape or just not show up for the rituals. And then we come to a dramatic showdown between Steerpike and Titus at the end of the book. Then Titus Alone is kind of a different novel. And some people, I've noticed in doing my research on this, some people actually skip the third book in the trilogy and just read the first two books as a duology. Because it really has a very, very different tone. And for one thing, there was never really a final draft of Titus Alone. Mervyn Peake wrote this right before he died. He was very, very sick, had some major health problems, and he finished the novel, but never really had a complete basically it was a rough draft, not a complete final draft. And a friend and his Mervyn Peake's wife took all his notes and illustrations and put them together for the novel. So some people don't really see it as a real final conclusion to the trilogy. Another thing, it was written when Mervyn Peake was dying. He knew he was dying. And so it has a very, very different tone. And there's some dark humor in the first two books. I mean, basically, I laughed out loud at some parts. So even though it's kind of a dark subject, and basically there's a lot of humor to it. but Titus alone becomes almost really dark, very disturbing. Uh, so they're, I mean, Mervyn Peake still tries to get humor in it, but it becomes more earthy if you want to work for that. But anyway, um, so in Gormenghast, the second book, we are introduced to. Oh, you have the characters from the first book because it's still set in Gormenghast Castle, but with Titus now being of school age, we are introduced to a whole set of professors. The head professor being, his name is Dead Yawn, and he has a personal assistant named Fly, or the Fly, they call him. I'm the Fly. Then we have the professors who have names like Belgrove and Cutflower and Flannel Cat, stuff like that, a whole bunch of, and they become kind of like a comic relief for the book, following the professors and their doings. And then the third novel, Titus Alone, the only character we follow from the first two books is Titus himself, but we are introduced to a whole new cast of characters, including a woman named Juno, a girl named Cheetah, a man named Muzzle Hatch, and a man who really doesn't have a name, but they call him Anchor, as in the anchor of a boat. So the problem with Titus Alone, it not only switches tones, but it kind of switches times in a way. When you read Gormenghast and Titus Grown, you kind of get the idea that this is like a medieval castle and kind of in medieval settings. You know, they ride on horses and stuff. Then all of a sudden, Titus Alone, he's out in the world and people are driving cars and flying airplanes, and becomes much more modern. There's even a scene where there's a flying drone. This was written in the early 50s, but they have a flying drone spying on people. So Mervyn Peake kind of could tell the future a little bit. So it kind of switches almost not just settings in the fact that it switches from being in the castle to outside the castle, but it also switches kind of timelines in a way, or time settings. So I don't really want to give away too much about this, but those are kind of just a rundown of the books. So what it was like using ChatGPT. It was interesting. It was almost like being back in a literature class. I wasn't using ChatGPT to dumb it down for me or make me understand it better. It really was like if I found a scene or something that caught my eye, or if a quotation really struck me, I would put it into ChatGPT, and we would really, I call my ChatGPT Robin. Robin and I would discuss it. You see some of the names. You have Swelter and Clarice, Gertrude, Nanny. So here's Irma Prunesqualler, the sister of the doctor. So it was kind of really just discussing it with ChatGPT, and it would make mistakes. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't exactly know what scene I'm referring to. And sometimes, one time it kind of got the characters mixed up, but it was still a good discussion with AI. One thing I found interesting is that AI would often ask me questions, and mostly the questions they would ask me was how I felt about the characters, and it would keep track of my reactions to the characters as time went on, because as they reached the arcs and they kind of changed throughout the novels, sometimes your opinion of them changes. For one thing, at the very beginning of the first novel, I told ChatGPT, or as I call him, Robin, I told Robin that I actually liked Steerpike, the villain. I actually kind of admired him, the way he could read people and use that to manipulate, which I don't know what that says about my personality, but I actually liked Steerpike a lot. And ChatGPT, of course, Robin, he said that was actually very common. A lot of people do at first like and almost admire Steerpike, but as the first two novels went on and Steerpike's plans got a little too manipulative and really diabolical in a way. Well, not in a way, they were diabolical. You kind of, Steerpike kind of really learns to turn you, kind of tends to turn you off. It's like you kind of get an aversion to him and his plans. This is what the twins look like. And another thing is like, in the third book, Titus Alone, I started to not like the main character of Titus. So we have the first book where you don't get much of a character out of Titus anyway. Then we watch him grow up in the second book, and we sympathize with him and kind of like him. But I had to mention in the third novel that I did not like Titus very much in that novel. And Robin said that was very normal too. A lot of people tend to, and that's why a lot of people tend to skip the third book. They kind of hear it's just not the same as the first two. So that was kind of interesting, that how AI would kind of keep track of my feelings towards the characters. Now, one of the very first, I think the very first thing I said to AI, told them I'm reading the Gormenghast trilogy, and it reminds me of Dickens. Like from the very first paragraph, I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds like a Dickens novel. The way, because basically it starts out describing the castle, what it looks like, and it sounded very Dickensian. Is that the word? Very much like Dickens. The way he described things, and also like, kind of get the jolly old gentleman. That's Dr. Prunesqualler is kind of the jolly old gentleman who is actually smarter than what he appears to be. That's a common character trope in Dickens' works. And of course, we have the names. Names like Prunesqualler and Flannel Cat, Dead Yawn, and stuff like that. Just kind of really weird names. So, but from the beginning, I kind of say, oh, okay, this sounds like Dickens. And AI said that a lot of people do make that comparison to Dickens. Now, here's where I got into an argument with AI, because actually, AI is not always as agreeable as you think they would be. The argument was, AI said that the difference between Mervyn Peake and Dickens was that Mervyn Peake's Gormenghast, this huge, huge castle, there's a lot of real estate to this castle. It's extremely huge. However, the characters are kind of contained in their own environments. They pretty much stick to their own rooms. Hardly ever see each other even. But they don't go exploring the castles. There are parts of the castle that is falling down and stuff. Because basically they like sticking to their own environment. Their own little rooms that they set up for themselves. So AI said the difference between Peake and Dickens is that Peake takes technically a small environment, just one castle, and make it seem like its own world. Meanwhile, Dickens takes a whole world, like the world of London, if you would, and kind of has a whole variety of characters and plots that really spans a vast environment. And I kind of argued back. I kind of pushed back on AI. I said, well, no, that's not exactly a difference, because Dickens, even though it expands like a whole city like London or even outside of London, a lot of times in Dickens novels, you still have a small world experience because you find out this character just happened to be secretly related to this character. There's always the connection between the characters that you think would not have any connection at all. So there's still a kind of a small world, big world, small environment. And so AI kind of pushed back a little bit, said, nah. But so I did get in an argument with AI, but I thought that was interesting too, that it would stick with its own argument. They said my pushback was fair, but they still stuck to their guns. And at the end, when I finished Titus Alone, AI asked me how I felt about the ending. I'm not going to give anything about the ending away, but AI let me know that a lot of people do not like the ending, again, which is why a lot of people also skip the third novel. A lot of people are unsatisfied with the ending. But I actually kind of liked the ending. It made sense to me. And without giving away spoilers, so when Titus leaves his castle, goes out into this brand new world that he's never been to before, he finds out that freedom comes with a price. And one of the biggest things is nobody knows that he's the 77th Earl of Gormenghast. Nobody cares. They don't even think that Gormenghast even exists. And so he's kind of left questioning himself, who am I really? And the ending doesn't exactly answer that question, but still kind of ends in an ambiguous way. But it does have closure. I will say it does have closure. Just he never gets to really answer that question about who he really is. So I liked the way it ended. My feelings toward Titus. In the third novel, I started not liking him very much, and then by the end, I was okay with him. And that kind of leads me to why this is a life-changing experience for me, because I actually had that diagnosis of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and this was recommended to me by someone who knows my sense of humor and thought I would find it funny, this idea about rituals, the rituals we do without even knowing why we do them. And I did. I got it. I got the connection there. And also, I grew up as a pastor's daughter, and I couldn't help but compare a lot of these rituals with church. And, I still consider myself a Christian. I'm not saying anything against church, but, let's be real. Sometimes we do rituals in church and we don't even really know why we're doing it or what the meaning is behind those rituals. And there was this one scene where they were doing a ritual. This was in the first book, when Titus was a baby. They were doing a ritual, and the ritual master's giving the speech that he had memorized that everybody else doing the ritual had spoken. And what the author does is he does some head hopping. Basically, he goes from one character to the next and kind of shows what they are thinking. And of course, they are thinking about everything else under the sun except the ritual, which, you can't tell me that doesn't happen in church. People sit there, it looks like they're listening to the sermon, but basically they're thinking about the pot roast in the oven. So I'm going to get off the religious subject there, but, just to be real, it's like, it wasn't just the OCD that connected with me, but also the religious ritual that connected with me too. Kind of made me see the absurdity of it sometimes. So anyways, so ending, even though we don't really get the answer to, it's kind of an ambiguous ending. Sorry, I saw a picture there, but it wasn't appropriate to show, so I'm skipping over it. Um, Even though it was an ambiguous ending, it kind of, as a person with OCD and a person who was raised in the church, it kind of left me with a sense of like, you know what? It's okay. Rituals are not exactly bad, but you don't have to be bogged down with them either. You don't have to let them control your life. And I think that was why it was recommended to me in the first place. And that's why I consider it a life-changing experience. It kind of opened my eyes to, you know, especially with the OCD, you're not exactly going to get over some of the rituals. They are really hard to battle. But um, but you don't have to be bogged down by them, and it's okay to see the absurdity in the rituals too. I'm showing you mostly the first two novels as I'm flipping through, but here as I'm ending the video, kind of want to give you some pictures from the third novel. That's Muzzle Hatch right there. The Peake always says that, always describes Muzzle Hatch as having a rudder for a nose. So he draws that in his sketches. There's Muzzle Hatch and Titus. So anyway, I don't think I remember ever seeing any pictures of the two girls, Juno and Cheetah. He has a lot of pictures about Muzzle Hatch. Apparently, he liked drawing Muzzle Hatch, but yeah, this one didn't have as many illustrations either. Again, it's because it's not a completed work, but basically, I don't think he has any pictures of the two girls. But anyway, so the ending kind of left me. That's Muzzle Hatch again. But the ending just kind of left me with a grateful feeling. Grateful that it was that I got to experience this book, get to learn some lessons from it, and have fun doing it. There are some. It is a humorous book in a way, and it was also a life-changing experience because this is the first time I've ever used AI as a reading buddy, and that was kind of interesting too. It's a neat experience. One thing I kind of laughed about, I said something about a scene that happened in the book, and I was kind of commenting about how weird that scene was, and Robin, the AI, said, "Well, that's Peake." And I don't know if it meant to make that joke, but yeah, I thought that was funny that it did. So anyway, hope you're satisfied. I hope I convinced you at least a little bit to try the Gormenghast trilogy if you have not yet. And don't be shy to use AI as reading buddies either. It might be very interesting. But anyway, thank you for tuning in and my Gormenghast video. I'm not going to do this very often where I focus a video on just one book because I kind of like it when we talk about multiple books in a video. But I just thought this needed its own video. So I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you like the video, and tune in for some more videos. Thank you. Bye.